I am back. Another late night session. Don't get used to these, but we're doing another late night session. All right. Another late night philosophy, part two, a defense of moral realism. I forgot to play some music yesterday, so let me do that this time. I won't I won't forget this time, guys. Uh what do I feel like though? I think I'm gonna do some more anime music, if you don't mind. Um, I know some people told me play like some other type of music, but I don't want to play anything lyrical, so I'm gonna only play lo-fi type music. Okay, that's safer. So I won't get copyright claimed. If I get copyright claimed, I'll just have to delete the this upload. And I don't want to do that because I want to be able to, you know, um, monetize it. So I clicked on the wrong one. There we go. Music anime. So anyway, as I see people appearing and disappearing on here like virtual particles in the vacuum of space. um, if you don't get that joke, it's a very nerdy joke. Anyway, as I see people jumping in and out of uh, the fabric of space and its uh, absolute vacuum, I'm going to launch into my little spiel here. So, football boys say, "What's up? What's going on?" So, again, this will be a little another nerdy late night talk. Yeah, I got distracted last time, yesterday, last night, talking about philosophy because I started talking about a whole bunch of other stuff. So, again, this is Late Night Philosophy Part 2. And this one, I'm going to constrain it a little bit than yesterday. I'm going to just talk about morality and specifically kind of quasi defend moral realism. It, the reason I want to defend moralism um, is because it's funny how people will launch into all sorts of like political views and social views, but quizzically they will claim that moral relativism, and it's like this pertains particularly to people on the left. If you're not clear here, I'm I'm looking like sorry, I'm attacking people particularly on the left because most people on the right, even if they're wrong about what they believe, at least they more or less believe in some sort of moral realism. But it's hard to take people seriously who have strong political views, but at the same time defend moral relativism because it leaves you no legs to stand on to defend your views. So it's like, how can you how can you convince others that your political views are right if you believe that morality is relative or subjective? That kind of doesn't make sense. It would be kind of like saying, you know, it would be like telling someone this is the best flavor of ice cream. Like, hey, um, for me, cookies and cream is my favorite. It would be like me telling people cookies and cream is the best ice cream flavor there is, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, really?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." then they ask me what I think about personal taste. I'm like, oh well, personal taste is all subjective. Well, if personal taste is subjective, I have no way of defending the view that cookies and cream is the best ice cream flavor in the world, right? So it's that's how silly people on the political left sound, saying that when they have a spirited defense of uh, all their of social justice, and don't trying to get rid of all sorts of systemic inequality, but at the same time believe that morality is relative, is like that. That's the self-defeating. So um anyway, anyone who's making a oh, by the way, if you're making a comment that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, I'm just gonna ignore you because I don't respond to retards. And yes, I'm talking. If you think I'm talking to you, I'm probably talking to you. So anyway, all right. So anyway, that's one of the main reasons I want to defend morality is that well, defend moral realism. At least a weak version of moral realism. I'm not going to defend a strong version of moral realism because I don't think I don't think there's grounds for a strong moralism. Excuse me, a strong moral realism. I think there is a there is a empirical argument for a weak moral realism. So what's up, Critical Rick? So the reason I'm saying that I'm separating strong moral realism from weak moral realism is when I say strong moralism, that is the that is sort of the views where morality is something in your face that you can actually this tangible, like you can point to something and say that very thing is moral or immoral. And I think moral relativists have made quite convincing arguments that that's just not the case. There's nothing that you there's nothing like I think that you can look at in the world and literally just point that out and say that's moral and that's immoral. The moral relativists are about that are right about that, but where they are wrong is saying that there's no legs on which we can stand to say that some acts are morally permissible and some acts are morally impermissible. They clearly are, and part of it goes back to human evolution. We all have basic moral instincts of right and wrong. On top of that, not only do we have these moral instincts, they seem to be universal because when you look at cross cultural research from different cultures across the world, um, we see that a lot of us share this, pretty much all of us share the same universal moral taboos against certain things like stealing, or grape, um, in incestuousness, uh, dishonesty, and other things. So we all have universal moral taboos, and we all are born with certain moral instincts. It's that it takes sort of moral training to hone in on those moral instincts in the same sort of as this guy, Dr. Mark Hauser, argued in his book that he said, I don't know if I would go so far as what he says, but he claims that not only do we have universal moral instincts, but he claims this we have a universal moral grammar, just the way we have a universal verbal grammar, which is like our innate, we have, an innate principles of language from which we all develop language as a human, as a uniquely human instinct. Um, he claims the same for morality, that we all have a universal moral instinct, that basically these moral principles built into us, and that through training we all will express those moral principles. Um, I don't know if I completely agree with him, but I see where he's going with it. But he's right that we do have moral. We do have we all do have some basic moral instincts. So there is at least something tangible on which to say there is something objective about morality by the by virtue of the fact that we all have moral instincts and they seem to be innate, and it seems to be that we evolved to have these instincts so that we could live coexist harmoniously with each other, well, more or less. Critical race is the whole gender swapping thing moral. So is it moral to allow children to do the gender swap thing? I don't know what you mean by gender swapping, but um, I'll say this. Another problem with morality is that people can't distinguish morality from social norms from personal distaste. Just because something is distasteful doesn't make it immoral. And just because something breaks a social norm doesn't make it immoral. I think people need to understand those different, those, those three different categories. Something that you personally dislike doesn't make something immoral. Where we, t- where we talk about morality, we're talking about uh, undue harm to others or onto self. The trans thing that's sweeping the nation. That's not that's not sweeping the nation. That's just people who live online think that the trans community makes up less than 1% of the general population. It's not sweeping the nation. It's just the loudest voices online make the most noise. And but if you in the general population, they make up less than 1% of the population. Um, Transgenderism has been around. The people in that community will tell you there's been some version of transgenderism in civilization for a long time. We didn't always call them transgenders; they went by other names. But I mean, people who cross dressed, or uh, men who were more feminine, women who were more masculine. That's always existed. I mean, Freud himself talked about gender norms being fluid. He Freud never got into transgenderism because that wasn't something that was discussed in the Victorian age. But he did recognize certain things. One, he recognized homosexuality was not a mental illness. Okay. He recognized that gender norms were fluid, that that there was nothing purely biological about masculinity or femininity, that was culturally ingrained. And this comes from a guy like Freud was an Austrian neurologist, so he did believe that most behavior, if not all behavior, is based in the brain, because he was a neurologist by training, but he realized that certain things were um, more cultural than they were um, biological, I guess. But like I said, he never touched on transgenderism. I it would be it would be a lot of speculation for me to say where he would fall on that. However, I think that I suspect that he would recognize gender dysphoria as a genuine disorder because it is. Um, but like I said, being the gender dysphoria is a rare mental disorder, and that most, if not all, people who ascribe themselves as either being transgender, non-binary, third gender, or one of those other alphabets, they all are suffering that they're probably all suffering gender dysphoria. Um, but again, they're such a small part of the population. I think is exaggerated how much of a problem they are. What is the problem are trans activists who try to either social uh, socially bully people into accepting their gender ideology, or they try to push it through legislation. That's the problem. But as far as the amount of people who actually ascribe to that way of thinking, like it's like less than 1% of the general population. These are trans mom these have skyrocketed in the past 10 years. Again, by who's accounting though? What has skyrocketed is acceptance of them, not the amount of people who themselves consider themselves transgender. Again, just because they're overrepresented in media, but when you look at the stats, they make up less than 1% of the general population. I think as a bit of a boogeyman amongst people on the political right that believe that this is a huge problem. It's not. What is the problem is them pushing their gender ideology onto mainstream culture. That's the problem. Not that they themselves are overrepresented in the culture because they're not. But it's in any case, it's not a this is not a moral it's not a moral this is not a moral problem. This is a social problem. Like I said, this we have to distinguish the differences between what is morally permissible, what is a social norm, and what is just a matter of personal distaste. A lot of people just personally have a distaste of of people pushing extreme gender ideology, and I see why. I don't personally this I don't personally like it either, but I don't find anything immoral about it necessarily. So I wonder, is it our duty to protect the mind, body, and soul of children so they have an adult mind and take control of their lives? It seems careless to let children make life decisions. Your children, yes, it's not your duty to protect other people's children. That's a little creepy. Again, that that falls into social norms, not morality. Morality is deals with undue harm caused to others or onto yourself. What people do, what other people choose to do in their families within the legal sphere is that's not that's not a role of that's not a question of moral permissibility. It's just this is just a matter of this again this has nothing to, this is politics. This has nothing to do with ethics. I think some people want to legislate ethics, but that's a mistake. Um, in any case, as I was saying, as a defense of moral realism, I think we do have to recognize that one of, in order to have some legs to stand on to say that something is right or wrong, we have to acknowledge that morality can't be completely relative. If we say morality is relative, then leftists have no legs on which to stand to push their views onto others, much less to claim that it needs to be defended through legal processes. Because how, where how if morality is completely relative, where do you say something is wrong? How can you say that slavery is wrong? How can you say genocide is wrong? How can you say that SA is wrong? Looking at the wildfires in California that was probably caused by arsonists, how can you say arson is wrong? You can't say any of these things are wrong, which they are. You can't say any of these things are wrong if if someone claims the morality is relative, that is completely subjective. And I think you would think people on the left being claiming that they're the more educated of folks between the left and the right, which isn't true by the way, um, but you would think, being that many of them are overrepresented in academia, that they would recognize the morality can't be relative and still be so gung ho on their own personal political views. But overwhelmingly, you will see amongst the intellectual elite that they subscribe to some sort of moral relativism, which is just weird to me. Even like when I was younger and first going to college, so I'm like, how can you claim moral relativity, moral relativity, or even cultural relativity, um, and then want to claim that some things are right and some things are wrong? You can't do those in this. You can't do those both at the same time and in the same respects without it being a patent contradiction. So, if because I mean, especially in behavioral research, we often push cultural relativism, which it makes sense that there should be a little bit of cultural relativism in behavioral research so that you can study different aspects of society and culture within without without being a bit chauvinistic or ethnocentric. It makes sense, but to say that there's that all cultural standards are the same is just all cultural values are the same is just patently false. Like this happens particularly like when you're talking about individualism versus collectivism. Most Western cultures are more individualistic. Most traditional or Eastern Asian cultures are more collectivistic, where emphasis is put on the group as opposed to the individual, as it is in the West. If those societies were equal, then there shouldn't be certain people going to one particular culture over the other. It should be equal or stagnant, rather. But no, we overwhelmingly see people fleeing collectivist cultures to come to individualistic cultures because individualistic cultures have values that lead to more success, more happiness, more economic thriving. Collectivist cultures tend to leave people struggling um, and miserable because they always have to think of the group above themselves. So, in the same vein, with moral relativism, we can't people you can't it is contradictory to be a liberal or progressive and tell people, particularly conservatives or people in the far right and others, that they're wrong if you're claiming moral relativity. Moral If you're claiming that morals are relative, because how do you defend that? Like, where, on what legs do you have to stand to say that these people claiming that these immigrants should be sent back home is wrong, If you don't believe that there are things that are morally permissible and morally impermissible, you believe it's all just a matter of ethical subjectivism. Like then you that just erodes your argument. You can't talk about why you think people on the right are wrong because you have no you have no place to stand on to say that. You know, kind of reminds me of that first movie within the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins, when Bruce Wayne is still in training in Bhutan with the dark with the League of Assassins. Well, they didn't call them the League of Assassins there; they called them the League of Shadows, but it was the League of Assassins in the DC comics. And that Ra's al Ghul, sometimes called Rash al Ghul, whatever. Ra's al Ghul literally means the demon's head in Arabic. But anyway, Raz was telling Bruce when he caught him while they were sparring. He said, "You didn't defeat me." He said, "You merely um, he said you merely sacrificed yourself for." He said you sacrificed yourself for a killing stroke. So this I know that sounds abstract, but I'm getting to the point of liberals they've they've given up their square when they say that morality is relative, and then they want to argue against Palestine getting bombed or against abortion um, being removed from federal recognition. Now that it's returned back to the states because Roe versus Wade has been reversed, or they want to, or they getting mad that um, the president has defined the genders as only being two, male and female. You can't you can't def- you can't defend your views because you removed your very square on which you stand, which is moral, which would be moral realism. You have to have some sort of moralistic stance in order to make any sort of strong argument for any sort of political cause. And I don't think they get that. Anyway, let me get back. Krillrick says, of course, each parent cares for their own child. I mean, our duty as parents. Yeah, your duty as parents is one thing, but you again, one's duty as parents does not extrapolate to everyone's kids. Like, you know, if if you think a one of the great things about America is we have many options. So if you think your school is pushing gender ideology on your children, it can always be up to you to remove your kid from that school and either homeschool them, send them to private school, send them to parochial school. So you have those options if you don't like the public school that that your school, I mean, that your kid is going to pushing a certain ideology with which you disagree. Cameron Seal says, "Hi, what's up?" Critical says, "Is it moral for a parent to force their own decisions on their child?" Yeah, I mean, I think you're using the word moral a little too uh, ambiguously. Um, it, it, Parents have every right to push their own decisions on their child because children don't know what's best for them. So parents do have parents definitely have a right to push their decisions on their child because otherwise, where would they get them? Kids are fundamentally, and I'm not you know making fun of anyone's child, but just as a matter of course, children are generally stupid. It's up to us as parents to guide them. So of course we force our decisions on them because they don't know any better yet. until they're an adult, they don't know how to make rational decisions for themselves. So, I mean, and we know from, uh, you know, from cognitive development that generally humans don't mature, don't reach full cognitive maturity until they're about 24. So, yes, as parents, we have every right to force our decisions on our kids. This is why, I mean, obviously so, right? Like, this is why people make fun of other parents who let their child decide what they want to eat, because you can't let a child decide what they want to eat because they don't know what's nutritious for them. You leave it to them, they'll just eat candy and McDonald's every day. No, that's not healthy. So yeah, we have to force our decisions on them. uh, Kuroko Rick says collectivist cultures get to power and find out you can't please everyone all the time. So to make it fair, no one is pleased. No, that's not what I mean by collectivist cultures. When I say collectivist, I'm not collectivist doesn't necessarily mean socialist or anything. Collectivist culture, like most East Asian cultures, are collectivist cultures. Particularly, like you look at places like Japan, South Korea, China, you know, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, and so on and so on. Like they have collectivist cultures. Some of it comes through a lot of the a lot of the collectivist values stem from uh, the fact that they all have like these are trained in this sort of this Confucianist. They have sort of this Confucianist worldview that's put on them as children through education. Whereas here, um, and I'm guessing in Europe as well, uh, we have Western thinkers who are put on us, the thinkers. Like we all know of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and Descartes, right? For them, it's people like Confucius and Lao Tzu, um, who, you know, if he existed, I don't think he actually existed, but I think his so-called disciple was actually the person who developed Taoism, Chang'e, uh, and the founder of like Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama. Like this is where a lot of their collectivist virtues come from. So it, it there is an emphasis to be honest. Both individualist cultures and collectivist cultures have their strengths and weaknesses. There are some strengths of collectivism, more co-harmonious societies, less less there seems to be less intra violence um, as in Western society, and other things. But there's often in us there's not a there's not a high value placed on truth, since certain truths can upset the stability of society and so forth. So, and in collectivist cultures, it's not as much emphasis placed on personal ambition and stuff like that. So you see more personal success and happiness in Western cultures, which is why you see people more often leaving collectivist cultures, come to individualist cultures. However, there are some weaknesses of individualism. Like obviously, taken too far, hyper individualism is where we're kind of steeping into now, where people don't care about others. That's a weakness of individualist cultures. Um, people put When people put themselves above the group, it can lead to misery amongst many folks for the sake of the few. This is why, Mr. Spock tells Kirk the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, which is sort of a utilitarianism sort of ethics, which is um, morality is for utilitarians, morality is grounded in whatever makes the greatest number of people happy, right? More or less, there's different versions of utilitarianism, but generally, utilitarianism is uses a sort of moral calculus where what is moral is what will benefit the most people. Obviously, that doesn't work for a lot of ethical scenarios, and this is why utilitarianism is a pretty bad ethical theory. And this is why Kirk disobeyed him in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Yes, I'm nerding out right now, but this is why Kirk just completely ignored Mr. Spock. And when Mr. Spock sacrificed himself to save the Enterprise, because being a Vulcan, he could take more radiation than any human could, and was able to contain the radiation on the Enterprise before it reached critical mass where it would have destroyed the ship. He was able to stop it at the cost of his own life, and in return, Kirk disobeyed Starfleet, stole a starship, took his whole crew with him, and went out to an abandoned planet just to save his friend. And he said because sometimes the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. This is individualism versus collectivism. So, uh, Rian says hi. What's up, Rian? Was it Ryan? I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. So, um, I know I'm all over the place, but again, I'm basically harping on the point that as much as conservatives may get things wrong, at least they at least they have at least they have some at least they have a stand on they have a square on which to stand, even if they're wrong. I mean, that's for many of them, they often use some sort of divine command theory on which to ground their moral realism. Now, obviously, that's easy to defeat, but just because a lot of conservatives subscribe to some sort of uh, divine command theory is just a fancy way of saying people who think their ethics is based on God's existence. Okay, or conversely, that um, that um, the existence of ethics, well, God's existence, uh, is part of ethics. Whatever. Like, I'm not going to get into it unless people want me to. But in any case, that most social conservatives tend to ground their moral realism in the divine command theory or something like that, which is why it's so easy for people on the left to be smug and say, well, if I don't accept your religion, then your morality doesn't mean shit. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean that there's no grounds for moral realism whatsoever, just because you can dismiss it on the fact that most of these people ground their morality in religious faith. Yeah, I'm in the States, um, at least for right now. But um, but I traveled a lot. That's why I can talk about East Asia. Right, like pretty much everywhere I just mentioned, most of those places I've already been. Not to mention, I'm a huge uh, lover of Asian culture. So, but yeah, anyway, like I said, my defense moralism is grounded in the fact that we have universal moral instincts that that appear to be innate and would have been probably um, a part of our a part of our psychological evolution to ensure that we can get along with each other. Um, and that kind of gets into a sort of like social contract theory. Social contract theory is basically um, saying that um, our morality is grounded in sort of uh, social, sort of a social agreement amongst people in society that they will give up certain freedom so that we can all kind of get along together without worrying about harming each other for the most part. There's a sort of like unstated, unwritten social agreement amongst humans that we will behave in certain ways with each other so as to not lead to utter chaos. And that this has probably been ingrained upon us through thousands upon thousands of years of intermingling with each other and finding that the 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 a state of like tr- unending tribal warfare was not a good way to was not a good way to live. So we had to extend our behavior, our good behavior, pro-social behavior. That's to say, we had to extend our pro-social behavior beyond just our kin and kith. We had to extend it to strangers, and then not to just strangers, but then to entire tribes, chiefdoms, kingdoms, nations, and so forth. Like we learned that there's certain moral behavior. There's certain moral behaviors that lead to human misery, and there's a certain moral behavior that leads to human flourishing. That is basically social. That is a very a very rough a very rough definition of social contractarianism. I try not to be too I try to limit my jargon a little bit. But yeah, um, like again, the moral relativists have a strong argument on their side to say that morals are relative, and then there's nothing that you can point to as a fact of the world itself and say that that very thing is moral, that very thing is immoral, just by pointing at it and saying, see, that's immoral. Like you can point at something and say, that's blue and that's yellow. You can't, there's nothing in the world that you can just objectively point and say, that's moral, that's immoral. So the moral relativists are right on that. Like I said, the problem is the, if their argument, whereas their argument is reasonable, is utter, I'm left unconvinced because again, if their argument was complete, then they owe they owe us some justification for why we should care about any other person besides ourselves, because we will have no moral standing upon which to say why we should or shouldn't do anything we want to any other person. Don Chelsea, hey, what's up? It's been a minute. How you been? I'm good, thanks. So this is my again to everyone coming into the group. I mean into the chat room. This is my late night philosophy session part two, Electric Boogaloo. So this is my late night philosophy, and I'm trying to give it like a quasi defense of moral realism. Again, I do mostly agree with moral relativists, but again, there has to be something objective about morality, or we wouldn't be able to disagree on all the human misery out there. Uh, Rick says, "What's a moral way to deal with people who won't abide by the social contracts? Not like criminals, jail for them, more like the mentally ill and drug addicts. What's a moral treatment for them?" That doesn't make sense. If you're talking about someone who's mentally ill and drug addicts, they're not they're not being immoral. To do something immoral, it has to be intentional. Like if someone if someone is severely mentally ill, they're not making rash like they're incapable of they're definitively incapable of making rational decisions. They what they're doing, they're not being immoral because they're not doing it intentionally. It has again, morality deals with doing causing undue harm to others. That requires a sort of intentionality, a mens rea, as they would talk about in legal processes. Like someone who's high or someone who is severely mentally ill is fundamentally incapable of making any sort of moral or rational decisions. That's not a matter of rationality. I mean, that's not a matter of morality. I, I think you misunderstand the scope of morality. Morality has to do with undue harm caused to others or to oneself intentionally. That's like it's this is why this is why we don't um, when we see animals in the wild, we don't claim that when one animal's killing another one for food or whatever, we don't claim that animals being immoral. Like we don't think they have those sort of mental processes. Um, or little children, like uh, just like there's stages of cognitive development, there's stages of moral development. Very young children are working with very limited understanding of morality, and until they actually develop a theory of mind, they are incapable of making any sort of moral decisions or judgments. Like a theory of mind develops around somewhere between the ages of 3 and 5. A theory of mind is basically knowing that there are other people who have beliefs and feelings different than your own, and that develops more as children age. So by the time they're 3, they start to realize that people around them may believe different things than they do. That's when they learn to lie and be deceitful. Because to be deceitful, to lie, which means intentionally be dishonest to others to trick them. That's lying. Means that you have to have a theory of mind that people have other different thoughts, feelings, and beliefs than your own. Um, until that is fully developed, which may not happen till I don't, I'm guessing around 5 or 6 when you have a fully working theory of mind. Until then, like a little child can't be held, can't say what they did is immoral. They may do something harmful to other people or to themselves, but it's not immoral because they don't have that capacity yet. If a 2 year old, you know, kills the house, kills the puppy or the kitten, it wasn't, they weren't being immoral. They don't know any better yet. Same thing with people who have moderate to severe levels of mental retardation. Like they don't have the capacity to make moral decisions. Mentally ill people have limited capacities for moral behavior, as do people who are currently under the influence of uh, of some sort of narcotic or controlled substance. This is why we typically we typically punish them for the behavior. We typically punish them for using the substances because we know under the influence they can't make rational or moral decisions, or at least if they, or or I would say they're severely handicapped in being able to do so. This is why people, the justice system is usually goes soft on drug addicts, which I actually disagree with. I think they should go harder on drug addicts because if you punish people for using these substances in the first place, they won't be under substances to cause harm to others. But that's a different discussion. That's a different discussion. Um, if you want to now, if you want to now, if you want to argue instead that people that it should be immoral for people to use substances, then now we have an argument. I'm not saying that's a good argument, but at least now we have an argument where we can say, is it morally permissible to use uh, substances that make you incapable of making rational decisions? Now we have an argument. But to just say, well, when people do stuff when they're mentally ill or under the influence of, of narcotics, then they're being immoral. Uh, I think that would be a very weak argument. Jane says, hi, what's up? Rick says, when there's a mentally ill guy who punches people all the time, what would be a moral way to deal with him? You lock him up. That's. I mean, you're not you're not a cop. Uh, if you see someone who's mentally ill hurting someone else, if this is not someone who's a family member or friend, you call the cops. That's literally that's their job, is to enforce the law. um, I mean, we would like. I mean, the case of the guy in New York City. Everyone is still everyone has chosen a side, even saying he's a complete. People take either the side that he's a murderer or that he's a hero. As far as I'm as far as I'm concerned, I would say he was a hero, but a flawed hero. Um, but in any case, uh, vigilantism is looked down upon by the justice system because if everyone tries to take justice into their own hands, it leads it leads to a lawless society. This is why we have laws in place that if you see a crime happening, you report it. You don't go in and try to do things yourself, except in some limited capacity. You can make citizens arrests, and you know, and maybe in some states or municipalities, there are laws that not only allow but tell you that you are supposed to help someone who is being victimized. Like the notorious finale of Seinfeld. The good when they supposedly went to, I think some place in Connecticut where they had a Good Samaritan law, so they were locked up under the Good Samaritan law because they didn't do anything to help the guy while he was being mugged. That's ridiculous, by the way. But yes, there, depending on where you live, there may be more freedom allowed to a civilian to go ahead and help someone who's being victimized. But for the most part, call the cops. That's how you deal with it. You have to, you know, one if you're taking it to a if you're taking it to the level of what's one's moral duty, that's again that's a certain ethical theory. You're subscribing to a certain deontological theory of ethics, which says that there are certain moral duties that people have. I'm not sure if I really believe that there are certain moral duties that people have. There's a good case for it to be made for sure, but I'm not sure I agree with that. Uh, Rick says, I'm not ascribing morality to the crazy person. I'm asking, in your opinion, what would be a moral way for society to deal with that person who can't abide by the social contracts? We lock them up. That's what. If a the, See, and this goes into how people view justice. Should it be retributive justice? Should it be rehabilitative justice? Or should it be a you know a restorative justice? Like I'm more of I lean more to we using the legal system to keep dangerous people out of out of society to where they can harm others. I don't see it. I don't see the legal system as being something to punish people. Like punishment doesn't work for one, and two, I don't think that any government is in any particular high standing to punish others. Like, but that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, as a society, how we what we the duty of a government is to protect its citizens. That is the duty. That is the moral duty of a government, and this is the social contract in which we all implicitly agree is that we allow a government to have authority over us as so far that they um, keep keep society safe and defend our society other from people outside of our society that would do us harm. So and national defense and law enforcement are the two primary roles or the two primary duties of any government is law enforcement and national defense. So Rick says we are getting more people on the autism spectrum put in prisons, and a lot of them are just chums with sharks. I don't know what you mean by that. There's always been a connection between crime and mental illness. I'm not sure if that pertains particularly to autism. Autism is a spectrum of many different disorders. Many of those folks are not in a position where they would be able to harm other people. Most of them don't even know how to deal with other people. They that's just untrue. It is a pervading myth of mental illness that most people who are mentally ill commit crimes. That's not true. That what is actually true is that more mentally ill people are victims of crime, not perpetrators of crime. Most people who are mentally ill are actually the victims of crime, not the perpetrators of crime. Too many people have watched too much of the Joker, watched too much Silence of the Lambs, and too much uh, Law and Order and CSI. And no, most people who suffer mental illness are more likely to be victims of crime, not perpetrators of crime. Rick says, my mistake. I'm throwing ASD, mentally ill, and crazy all in the same category. Just people without a good functioning brain. Yeah. Um, like I said, the problem, if anything, I have family who have suffered severe mental illness, and of course, studying psychology when I was in college, you know, we had to be around people like that, for certain studies or just reading about certain folks. And we realized that most of the time it's actually mentally ill people tend to be victims of crime. Now, are there certain mental illnesses where people are more likely to commit crimes? Yes, those are people under the that fall under the so-called dark triad of personality disorders. People who tend to be who are high in narcissism. Okay, narcissism, um, uh, um, psychopathy, um, and what's the other one? It's like narcissism, psychopathy, and uh, I forgot the other one. But people who fall under the dark triad of personalities may are more likely to be people who commit violent crimes. But for the most part, most people suffering from mental illnesses and and neurological disorders tend to actually be the victims of crimes. Bricks is not true. State schools are full of people on the spectrum who are huge and violent, and the family can't care for them anymore. Have experience with them, but that's anecdotal. The anecdotal experience can st- doesn't defeat behavioral statistics because the reason being is anecdotal experiences are they're just casual observations. Everyone's going to have different casual observations. We need systematic, objective observations that we can all publicly verify and test. This is the role of behavioral statistics. There, if there is a school where a lot of people are dealing with mental disorders and stuff like that, that's probably saying more about that community than about society at large. If you're in a if you're if you're in a low class segregated community, there's going to be more people suffering from problems dealing with mental illness, poor nutrition, uh, economic distress, and so forth. Autism is partly hereditary, so it's, there's not going to be an increase of autism like like it's just like some autism is not a social contagion. It's a neurological disorder and it's partly hereditary. What may be the case is that now many many educators have the ability to diagnose people with these problems and therefore be able to put them in special education. That doesn't mean that there's an outbreak of autism because again that's not how neurological disorders work. Autism, well, the spectrum of autistic disorders again are by and large neurological disorders, so they don't spread like a social contagion. That's not how autism is. And that again, that's not really anything to do with morality. I don't i don't know why you keep trying to extend that to morality. That's not a moral issue. That's an issue dealing with like behavioral health, public education, and uh, criminal justice. Not That's not really morality. Like, again, morality is when we're talking about this, the realm of morality. You're talking about moral behavior and what is morally permissible and what is morally impermissible. Meaning, is it justified to do X or Y, and if so, why? That's that's morality. And then if you get even more specific, then you break down morality into ethics, which is the different theories by which people ought to behave. If you're talking about um, ethical ethics as far as a normative ethics, but if you're talking about like ethics, like like how people actually ethically behave, then that falls into moral psychology. So again, get I think we're going talking about different things. Um, Rick says, I know the difference is anecdotal, statistical analysis, and case studies. Check your stats. You're wrong on this one. I'm not, again, I'm, you're conflating a lot of things. You're conflating autism, mental disorders, drug addiction, and issues in public education all into one thing, and that has nothing to do with morality. And again, I literally have a degree in this. People who suffer mental illness tend to be more the victims of crimes, not the perpetrators of crime. The people, the certain mental disorders where people are more likely to commit violent crimes are people who have like antisocial antisocial personality disorder and psych and or have uh, who have psychopathy or sociopathy, which they're kind of similar, but there's a slight difference between sociopathy and psychopathy. But anyway, people who are sociopaths, psychopaths, or have antisocial personality disorder, this falls within the psychopathic disorder spectrum. Those are the folks most likely to commit violent crimes. But again, even people who are psychopaths are not all potential criminals. That's not how it works. Psychopaths are just pretty much defined by their lack of empathy for others. But the thing is, certain people who have psychopathic tendencies are actually rewarded for their behavior in certain career fields. So in the corporate world, psychopathy can be rewarded. To lack empathy for others can kind of help you get ahead and to get ahead in your careers, depending on where you work. So, but again, just because one is a psychopath or sociopath doesn't necessarily mean they will be a violent criminal. Is the this There's no one to one correspondence between those things. They're more likely to be perpetrators of violent crimes, but again, not necessarily so. It's not necessarily the case that just because someone is diagnosed as with psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder, they will then go on to be a serial killer. So, so autism rates less. Again, that's not morality, brother. That's not morality. I'm talking about morality. That you're trying to discuss matters of abnormal behavior. That's not really morality. So autism rates less than 1 in 10,000 in 1980, less than 1 in 26 right now. First of all, I don't even know if those stats are true because I don't have any way to verify that. But let's assume they are true. Again, you're missing a few steps. because it's reported more does not mean that it's happening more. That means that there are better, they have better tools to diagnose people with autism, whereas a lot of people who suffered in silence just slipped through the cracks back then. Sort of like people with PKU before before this physician discovered phenylketonuria or PKU, a lot of people ended up mentally retarded at a young age. People didn't know why until they realized this was caused by a metabolic disorder that is genetic, phenylketonuria. Better reporting does not mean it's happening more. It means it's being better, it's being reported because we have better tools to diagnose it. And also because again, autism is not one disorder, it's an umbrella term for a bunch of different disorders that are all neurological in origin. And again, autism is neurological in origin. It does not spread like a social contagion. That's not how autism works. Because it's more reported does not mean it is spreading like some social contagion. That's not, most mental disorders are biological in origin, unless you're talking about again social contagion, with or that goes by different a bunch of different names. Um, Sociogenic illness, mass mass hysteria, blah 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 blah. Um, those have more cultural issues with them. Autism is not spread through cultural issues. It's a neurological disorder. Well, it's a umbrella term for a bunch of neurological disorders. But again, that's not morality, so I'm going to move on from that. It said, where it says statistically, people who have committed a crime are more likely to have a crime committed against them because they run in criminal circles and live in the high crime areas. That's actually false because, again, if you know, so, brother, I'm a behavioral science nerd. Here's the thing, ask anyone who has a good background in sociology. Virtually everyone is a criminal because everyone has committed a crime in their life. If you have ever committed a crime in your life, you are by definition a criminal. Have you never jaywalked? Have you never drank under the age of 21? Um, had unmarried sex? And so on and so on and so on. Virtually every person has always committed a crime, meaning everyone is a criminal. So if everyone's committing a crime, that that deflates that whole argument. That just not true. And it's again that has nothing to do with morality. You are trying to change the subject of what I'm talking about to something that you're interested in, but it has nothing to do with morality. If you want to talk about that, drop a super chat because that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about morality. I'm not giving a justification for autism or mental illness, and you're trying to moralize this. This is what leads to human suffering and misery is when people try to moralize things that are not categorically within the sphere of morality. Trying to moralize punishing people who are mentally ill or drug addicts, like, no, that's not morality. I'm sorry. You can keep pushing that as far as you want to, but that's your own personal that's your own personal battle to fight. That has nothing to do with morality as I'm discussing it. Mona says that's not true. Critical Rick understand the source. Mona says statistics are highly manipulated. Rick says I'm trying to get to the point of how does a moral society. You're not talking about morality. You're just trying to push your own personal battle with mental illness and autism that has nothing to do with morality. Again, morality gets to what is morally permissible, what is morally impermissible as far as causing harm to others or to oneself intentionally. Intentionally is the key. Like, if you're causing harm to someone and you don't know any better, that's not being immoral. Mental illness is not a matter of morality. It's not. If you're gonna say this is your moral stance to make, you have you you have to have some. You have to be able to stand on some square. This gets into ethical theorizing. What is the ethical theory on which you base saying that this is a moral stance to take? And this is the very reason why so many people claim moral relativism, because they see that a lot of people have strong moral views but have no way to defend those views. If you can't, so, and I'm not trying to pick on you, I'm using this as an example of what I'm talking about here. If you cannot defend and justify your moral views, it's hard to say that what you're saying is actual a matter of morality and just not a matter of what you take to be a matter of social norms or personal distaste or legality. What is legal, what is a matter of social norm, and what is a matter of personal distaste are all distinct from what is actually moral. Those are four distinct categories: legality, social norms, personal distaste, morality. Moment says interesting, but consider the source is all I'm saying. So morality is the topic. So do you understand what I'm saying? Like, he was saying, he said, think deeper, take 5 minutes and define morals because I take it as personal code. So again, the problem is there's different, everyone has different definitions of morality, sort of like intelligence. But just like we can define general intelligence, but intelligence is, and, or, what we call general, well, I don't want to go there because I don't want people changing the subject again. But um, morality is harder to define. But more likely, when we're talking about morality, we're talking about what we're talking about: harm and avoiding harm, unjust harm to others and to or to ourselves. That's that's generally morality, and usually it has to be intentional causing of harm or intentional avoidance of harm. This is why Immanuel Kant was, made this distinction between doing things, doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, and doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. Because you can do the right thing, but for the wrong reason. Like, you don't you don't steal. You're doing the right thing, but you're doing it for the wrong reason. You're not stealing because you don't want that guy to beat your ass. So you're not being moral. You're just avoiding getting your ass beat. That's not that's not being moral. That's just look. That's just making protecting yourself. Um, or his doing, or then you can also do the wrong thing for the right reasons. What's doing the wrong thing for the right reasons? The best the best example of doing the quote unquote wrong thing for the right reasons is, let's say we're living in France, World War II Europe. someone from the German SS comes knocking on your door. Excuse me, you wouldn't be happening to be harboring any Jews in your attic, would you? And you say, "Oh, no, absolutely not, sir. I would never harbor any of those people in my attic. If so, I will let you have them right now because I'm 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 not having that." And the German says, "Oh well, thank you, sir. Thank you for being honest with me. You're a good you're a good citizen. Keep up the good work. And if you hear of anyone harboring any of these Jews in your attic, or anyone as in anyone's house or anyone's attic around here, you let me know pronto, and I will deal with it." Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Then as soon as he leaves, you go up there. "Hey guys, you okay? Everybody okay? He's gone now. It's safe." Did he lie? Was that immoral? As adults, we can do the sort of nuance that younger children and stupid people are incapable of doing. So that's why morality is not that easy. If morality was so easy, it wouldn't be still such a cause for debate even in 2025. You can do the right things for the wrong reasons. You can do the wrong things for the right reasons. Then sometimes you can do the right things for the right reasons, and you can do the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. So um, this is why, even though we do have universal moral instincts and they are innate, we still need some sort of moral training to hone our ethical behavior. This comes through learning ethics. Get what I'm saying? So, um, but again, this is also why I'm defending moral realism, because there has to be something objective out there in the world on which to stand on your square and say that this is wrong and this is right. And this is why I say liberals will always are always shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak, when it comes to their social political views, because liberals tend to be the biggest moral relativists out there. And I get why, again, because a lot of people who are moral realists tend to ground their morality in religion, which is subjective. However, that doesn't mean that morality itself is completely subjective. Because if it is, then you no one can be in a position to say you can't you can't make that person a slave. You can't traffic those women. You can't take that man's house. Get out of stop stealing his car. Hey buddy, I was here first. Like you 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 can't there's there's no there's no epistemic position in which to ground one's social political views, as good or as bad as they may be, without being able to stand on some square. And insofar as many people on the left of whatever stripe, liberal, progressive, socialists, anarchists, whatever, like uh, as far as you've been, if you're a relativist, like you really, again, it just doesn't make sense. Bulls is looking good today, Fandle Diddy. Thanks, man. He said I worked out today, but it hurt morality. Uh, oh, you gotta take it easy with your feet, man. Like you didn't get the bionic upgrade just yet. He's a but it hurt. He said morality, my moral is live and let live, and no innocent civilians get hurt. Yeah, like I was telling Critical Rick earlier, um for people who are social contractarians like myself, like for the most part, we agree that pretty much every individual in society agrees to some sort of unwritten social agreement that we give up certain freedoms so that we can all kind of get along with each other and not be worrying about transgressing against each other. And then he said, what role does society have to kind of corral people's baser instincts, right? And I was saying, well, that's the that's the very reason we have a government is for to protect its citizens from danger from each other and from external danger. Like the two basic reasons of the two basic responsibilities of any government is national defense and law enforcement. So he said that's fair. I agree. Thanks. But yeah, like I said, but again, I agree in a weak moralism, not a strong moralism, because I don't think just like moral relativism is too extreme. I think strong moralism is too extreme as well. Because strong moralism is like where you can just point to things and say that's absolutely morally wrong or that's absolutely morally right, and there's really nothing if you're serious that you can point to in the world and say that is a moral thing or that is an immoral thing because it's not tangible in that sense. What we can observe is people's moral behavior, and we can determine from if someone's moral behavior is permissible or not based on its on its outcomes or likely outcomes, or you know stuff like that. But that gets into sort of like consequentialist ethics. So consequentialist ethics has problems too that I don't even want to get into that. Anatoly says in some cases you can say some things are wrong. Absolutely. What I'm saying, Anatoly, is I'm saying there's no fact of the matter in the world itself to point at a like like so if you want to point at my walls and say his walls are of a bluish color, like that's a factual statement. But I don't think it's the same that you can point at a particular thing and say that's immoral or that's moral because it's not tangible in that same way. This is what concludes many moral relativists to say that that morality is relative. So um, there was one people called um, they were moral relativists, but they called themselves ethical. I forgot. Basically, they were saying that when you say that something is moral or immoral, you're basically just saying, um, "Hey, I like this," or "Hey, I dislike this." So again, moral relatives do have a strong argument. My problem is if you take if you take the moral relativist or ethical subjectivist argument to its logical to its logical conclusion, it leaves you no room to ever be able to say that something is right or wrong and that happens in the world because you have no position in which to do so. That's the problem with moral relativism, is that it leaves you in a state where you can never say that anything that has ever happened or is going to happen is right or wrong. You can't say that human trafficking is wrong, right? You can't say that genocide is wrong. You you can't say invading another country is wrong. You can't say poisoning your own citizens is wrong. You can't say just stealing people's homes is wrong because you are in no position to do so because the given up the high ground like Anakin Skywalker because you said, oh well, this is all relative. And if you're a good student of Obi-Wan like Luke was, you, you never give up the high ground. um Moonless is exactly right, but that's how I feel about politics too. That's fair. He says like, share, and sub, or hit super chat, guys. Thank you. Moonless says hit the emojis too, y'all. It disrupts the algorithm. It does. I so does when people hit the emojis, Moonless, does that actually help? I don't know how that works actually. Anatoly says, I'm wondering what you think about a certain country that allows 9-year-old children to get married to men. I think in this case, I could say this is wrong. I don't know if you say a particular country because that happens in more than one country in a particular region of the world, like the Middle East, where they have practiced uh, child marriage for centuries. I don't want to rub anyone the wrong way though, because I don't want to criticize Islam or anything like that. But yes, there's a lot of uh, arranged child marriages in the Middle East and North Africa. Um, the question is it morally permissible? It depends because all of them aren't the same. So some of the arranged child marriages, they arrange who are to be married while they're still children. Like the two families will get together and say, "We're going to have your daughter marry our son." But like I said, in some cases, what happens is those kids are basically uh, engaged until they reach the age of adulthood where they are married. I I don't think that's a case of morality because that's not causing like undue harm. When it's causing undue harm is when they are actually marrying them at that young age and expecting them to consummate that marriage. That's causing harm. Even worse is and this is by no means the norm, but let's just put it out there, right? Let's put all our cards on the table. The more pernicious version of this is when is a child arranged to marry an adult, as is alleged of the founder of that religion, right? Of course, that's immoral because one, if we're looking at through Kantian ethics, it it fails the categorical imperative, which is that well, there's many different versions of the categorical imperative, but basically they all imply that something has to be universal. If something can't be universally applied to every individual, then it can't be morally permissible, right? So obviously, it fails that version of that type of Kantian ethics, and it pretty much fails any sort of ethical test, right? But again, that's not most versions of prearranged childhood marriages. So I don't want to all throw them in that same category because they're not all in that same category. I think to be fair, right, we have to make those distinctions. Most of the like I said, many of those arranged childhood marriages is that the families agreed that their children will be married to each other when they reach the ages of adulthood. But in other cases, they have the kids marry at a young age, and but then they don't consummate it until they become older. That's still, I find that very morally dubious. And then of course the most pernicious example of that, where it, it would be very hard to say that this is morally permissible in any sort of society, is where the child is arranged to marry an adult. That's just yuck, right? Um, Mullen says yes, and that you're more and good on you. And so he says, speak your mind, man. Oh, I always speak my mind, but I have to put things in a certain way so that my video doesn't get demonetized. Because again, I can only, if I'm not receiving donations from viewers, I get my monetization through the 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 ads they place in these videos after I upload them. So I have to be very particular about what triggers YouTube's algorithm, because not all content is ad suitable. So you have to express things a certain way. This is why we avoid the R word and the A word in videos. People don't say we or we don't say the K word. We say unalive. Um, we say SA. We say um, unalive the children, because we can't talk. We can't use those actual terms because they are not suitable in content that can be where advertisers will feel comfortable, placing their ads. So it has to be family friendly. It's obviously the more articulate a content creator is, the better he can get around that. So Mona says yes, it makes your channel pop up in people's lives when they scroll. I didn't know that, so I didn't know emojis had any effect on that. So that's cool. I didn't Something new I just learned. All the little YouTube creator videos I've watched has never said anything about emojis. So that's the first time I learned that. Thank you. And Tony says, "Don't you think it would be a good choice though?" What would be a good choice? Because I'm a few minutes behind. I'm not sure what you mean. And he says that's correct. Melissa says, "Yes, we all do. Yes, marriage is a choice." And Tony said the founder married her when she was 6 and consummated it when she was 9. Yes, I have heard that. Because I don't know whether that's true. Uh, because again, when this comes from people who are not from that, if 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 I had imams telling me that that's true, then I would think it's more likely to be true. But if people outside of the religion are telling me that's true, I have to take that with a grain of salt, because people outside of the religion just may have a distaste for Islam, and for good reasons. Because let's be honest, the Islam as it's practiced in the Middle East, it's like they're still stuck. It's like basically they're still stuck in the Middle Ages, whereas Christianity got past this violent course back in, like, after, like, I would say by the 1700s. Christianity got out of its violent sphere, right? Some some people might not say until the 1800s or 1900s. We can debate that later, but the fact of the matter is, like, Christianity has gotten past its barbaric traits, where Islam still is in the midst of trying to get past that. Um, but whether the founder and his beloved Aisha, yeah, I know. But yeah, if that was true or not, I don't know. I would if someone wants to come on and who is of Islamic faith to tell me or not. And again, I've read the Quran, well, as much as I could read it, because it reads more like poetry than as most of it reads more like poetry or as lyrics to a song than as like literature. But as much as I've read through the Quran, it didn't go into the specifics of that so much. So I don't know. I think I would have to have taken like uh, went to went to Quranic school to know those sort of facts. So I can't say as a matter of fact whether that's true or not. And so it says in my country, age of consent is 16, and I think it should be at least 18. Well, yeah, I mean, even here in the U.S. So here in America, federally the age of consent is 18, but each state has different ages of consent. It's best to always go by the national or international standard. That way you're safe no matter where you are. Internationally, it's 18. That's how you know it's safe. Like, I lived in the Philippines, and up until like four, I'm gonna say until about 4 or 5 years ago, the age of consent there was 12, and I'm not kidding. Luckily, most people went by, you know, by international standards of the UN, which is 18. Um, but again, if you lived in the one of those provinces and you did whatever, other than the people's parents coming down and doing something to you, you weren't doing anything against the law until they fixed that, which they should, which thank goodness they fixed. Same, and they're not the only place, and it's not because they're a third world country. Because Japan used to have a low age of consent as well, which is why you probably should not watch any Japanese adult videos made before the 70s. Not saying that someone will watch something that damn old anyway, but there's no if you watch something before the I'm going to say before the I'm going to say before the 90s. If you were watching Japanese AV before the 90s, you might have been watching something where the women were not of age. And then on top of that, in some East Asian cultures, still in Korea today, their their age system isn't the same as ours. Like they're not when they are born, they don't start them at age 0. They start them at age 1, and they all uh have they all change age at the same year. I don't even get into it. It's confusing, but basically, it's to establish a hierarchy of uh, people. It's a hierarchy of seniors and juniors. Just like in Japan, you have senpai and kohai. Like they have something similar in South Korea and probably I guess North Korea as well. I don't want to get into that, but consent is a good rule of is a good question for like contemporary moral issues. Definitely, I'll say that much. Amon says at 16 you're not fully developed mentally. That goes in my moral. Um, yeah, I mean, for me, it's not moral; it's what's legal. Because I mean, as far as I'm concerned, a 16-year-old male and a a 16-year-old male and a 23-year-old male are not that drastically different from each other. So I would, again, it's tricky when we're talking about what is something within the sphere of morality and what's in the sphere of legality and what's in the sphere of social normality and personal distaste. That's why we have those four distinct domains, because that stuff gets tricky. Where things get tricky is when you put on your rationality cap and say, okay, I don't know whether it's moral or not, but I know it's illegal, so I'm not doing it. Right? Um, or 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 you can say, well, I don't know if this is immoral, and I know it's not illegal, but I know it's not socially normal, so I'm not going to do it in this area because I know if I do, I'll be ostracized. So, for instance, it's nothing illegal or immoral about giving your dog red rockets, but if you get caught giving your dog red rockets, people are going to think you are a weirdo and avoid you. So, um, Moonlit says I'm more think age 30 or above. Well, I'm talking about cognitive development. Like the thing is, cognitive development actually never stops. Cognitive development happen. There's stages of cognitive development throughout the human lifespan. But as far as when we reach cognitive maturity, is typically not to about the age of 25. So uh, adolescence ends at the age of 21, but but I'm sorry, but uh, cognitive maturity pretty much doesn't take place until the age of 25. And you see this, and this it makes sense because this is also around the same age that insurance drops for adult males, around the age of 25 when they can be more responsible. This is when insurance drops for us at the age of 25. This is when we're pretty much seen as fully functional adults in society. As far as people saying, well, around the ages of 30 and 35 is when you're a full adult. This is more this is more in line with male behavior, not so much cognitive maturity. This has to do with like responsibility, social responsibility and male behavior. Like we really don't get into our own as full-fledged men until about the ages about to about 30, 35. But that's not really issue of cognitive development as so much as it is has to do with social responsibility and stuff like that. Like our parents and grandparents had to be more socially responsible at a younger age. They weren't allowed to be immature until they got to the ages of 30. A lot of them had to be responsible at the ages of 18, 20. So Anatoly says it's in the Quran. It might be, but again, I don't remember them speaking specifically of the ages of Aisha and when he married her and when he consummated the marriage with her. I've heard it talked about, but I've heard it talked about outside of the Quran itself. Again, I'm not saying that it's not in the Quran, but I'm saying you would probably have to take Quranic lessons to suss that out. Because again, when you read the Quran, it doesn't read like prose. It reads more like poetry, and I think that's intentionally so. Um, Melissa as well reread the Quran. Like I have the Holy Quran in one of my books. I mean, in one of my boxes here, right next to my Bible. I have a I think I have the international version of the Bible and I have the Quran, and it's both in Arabic and in English. Like the first half is all in. I got both of them at school, like because there were always religious organizations coming to the school and giving away free Bibles, free Qurans. Like the Islamic group at school. I remember they had their little stand set up at the student union, and I was like, "Hey, can I have a Quran?" And the girl lit up. She's like, "Absolutely, yes, please have one." I was like, "Oh, thank you." You know, so uh, Melissa says it's got plenty of good teachings and hard ones too, as as all religions do. Christianity as well with all the remixes of the Bible. They got the P Diddy remix of the Bible. Let me stop. Someone's gonna get mad at me. They were like, "No, he didn't say the Diddy remix of the Bible." Oh, they got the Diddy remix. Has no one read the Song of Solomon? But anyway, um, that has to be the most pornographic stuff I've ever read in the Bible. But anyway, I'm on this as well. Apparently, I was told I deny a lot because I love pork and I'm Native American. So here's the thing: some people don't know. Um, if there is no other choice, Muslims are allowed to eat pork if it's a matter of survival. Whether it's a person, whether it's a and that survival could mean like hunger, or it can mean like you know um, not being unalived. So you are you are a, it is not haram to eat pork if it is a matter of survival. And someone can fact check me on that, but that's something that I do remember. Now, obviously, you can't just be eating baby back. Obviously, if you're a Muslim, you can't be eating baby back ribs and say it's a matter of survival. Like, nah, man, it's July 4th, and it's not haram because them baby back ribs was on sale, whole slab. So I sprinkled them bad boys down with some caramel and some. Stop, stop. But yeah, you are allowed to eat pork if it's a matter of survival. That's not haram. It's only haram when you're eating it just as to because you want to eat it. That's not a matter of survival. Mona says he's telling the truth, y'all. He said Japanese JV. He said shh, senpai. Right. Mona says okay. What happens when a 30-year-old woman and a 14-year-old student? Well, yeah, that's well. If you're a teacher and a student is already immoral because there's a power imbalance. On top of that, she's an adult and the kid is a minor, so that's not a that's not a morally dubious area. That's just morally impermissible because of both the power. There's there's two power imbalances. One, she's the adult, he's the minor. Two, she's the adult. I mean, she's the teacher, so she's on the role of she's in a superior role, while he being a student is in the inferior role. So that's a clear case of something being morally impermissible. Because even if he was of consenting age, it would still be at least morally dubious. This is why in college it's frowned upon professors dating their students because there's a power imbalance. Now, well, at least in my alma mater, because I think we asked some professors I forgot what class, but they said it's not disallowed, but it's not exactly, but it is frowned upon at my alma mater, which is fair. Basically, they're saying don't do it, but if you do it, be discreet. So I think that's the unwritten rule, is that you shouldn't do it, but if you are going to do it, you should be discreet about it. Uh, but you say yeah, and the woman gets into no trouble. I don't know where these teachers, Molly, I don't know where these teachers were when we were kids, bro. There were no hot teachers when I was little. They were all old and gray. Like these little hot teachers didn't exist back in the 80s and 90s. Like it seemed like every teacher started at the age of like 30, which for us as kids that would have been old as shit. Like a, a 10-year-old looks at a 30-year-old the way a 25-year-old looks at a 60-year-old. Like you're old. Like so. But yeah, these hot teachers did not exist in high school when I was little. The only cute teacher I remember was when I was in the eighth grade. It was this Korean teach. There was this Korean lady. She was the art teacher. She was cute. Named Miss Bach. She was tiny. She was well, she wasn't tiny, tiny, but she was a typical Korean looking woman. Very flat face. Um, that had the single eyelids. Uh, had a very girly voice, and she taught something that was fun, art. Like I'll look back at it now, like I kind of had a crush on her, but I didn't know how to express it, and I just, I never, but he said I'm only asking to challenge your mind, though, did he? No, yeah, I was just saying in the case of an adult teacher and a child student, that's clearly a case of being immoral because it's causing undue harm to the student who is both not in a position to the student would be in an inferior position to to rebuff her advances, plus the fact that she's female and the student is the male makes it even worse because men are socialized to like it even when even when they don't want it. So um, um, what I miss here? Oh, someone said I have a sound problem. Can you guys hear me? Mona says thank you. I don't know where them hot teachers are. Yeah, they didn't exist when we were little, man. Let's be honest. Those teachers were hot back then. I think when they were hot was when we were probably in like elementary school and preschool, but to an elementary kid, to any kid in elementary school and preschool, no no teacher is hot. If anything, then the other thing is when we were elementary school, I don't know if this is just me, but I've asked other I've asked other adults, is when you saw your elementary school teacher outside of school, it was always a weird, like what is Mrs. So and So doing at the supermarket? Like I remember that happening once. Like um, she was actually she taught the after school program. Like um, I, I was enrolled in some little after school program when I was living in Chicago. Well, in Illinois, not Chicago, the city, but in the suburbs. And I remember seeing the teacher when we were going to the store, and that was just so completely weird to me as a little. I'm like 8 years old. And I'm like, what is she doing outside of the school? I didn't say that, but I was looking at her like, what are you doing existing outside of the school? So, for elementary school kid, we probably never saw anyone as hot. It's not until high school. But like I said, when I was in high school in the 90s, there were no hot teachers. And I went to three different schools, three different high schools, one in Philly, one in Baltimore, and one in the DC suburbs. And I don't remember, well, except for my theater arts teacher, she was she wasn't hot, but she was she was she was a I as an adult now I'm looking back at her like she was a hot little snow bunny, but at at that age I didn't see her as hot. I just saw her as a I just saw her as a woman as an older teacher, and she was probably actually in her late 20s. But again, I didn't see looking at it now. I would have definitely considered her hot. Like oh, she's a cute little snow bunny. But I didn't see that back then. Kaja Hussein says, "How are you, my brother? I'm doing well, thank you. I'm probably gonna end this soon, guys. It's late." Mona says, "I had a crush on my gym teacher, but I didn't go, but I didn't get no play." I hope that was a female gym teacher, right? I never had a female gym teacher. All my gym teachers were males. The only time I saw a female gym teacher was for the female students, and they always looked like a big bull dyke. Like every female gym teacher I ever saw was like looked like a bull dyke. Mona says, "Bro, middle school, I wanted to smash." Damn. He said, "Like, why they ain't throw it at us?" because they were because they were sane. That's why some of these teachers today aren't sane. There's no way I would risk. You know how hard it is to be a teacher. At least I can't talk for every state, but in Maryland, there's like two entrance. There's like two tests you have to take to make it to become a teacher. On top of the training, it is no way I would go through all that just to throw that away for a student. I don't care if the student was 18. I still wouldn't do it. To go like, mm-mm. Again, I think teachers were more rational when we were younger. They were like, I'm not. I'm sure they thought some of the male students were probably like cute, but they weren't dumb enough to risk it all like that. That's teachers today. Moon says you're using theater arts to bust down. Yeah, because I found out with theater arts, it removed. I didn't have to take art and music. Like it covered both art and music. My art and music credits just by taking theater arts, which makes sense because in theater arts, you're doing you're you're doing both musical performances and doing something artistic. Art, not art AUT, but we're we're doing artsy stuff and musical stuff through theater arts. So I took 3 years of theater arts, and I actually made it into the International Thespian Society because I ended up doing plays like we did. We did Grease, The Wiz. Then we did a really artsy play that I've never heard of. It was I forgot what it was called. It was like um, I don't remember what it was called, but Grease and Wiz, everyone's heard of. The funny thing is, we did Grease at a predominantly black school, and all the guys playing the Greasers were black. So it was funny because they would the dude was still had his little comb and kept going back like this, like he had a pompadour. It was hilarious. Like the people in the audience were laughing because he was funny as to he was funny as shit too. My boy James, he actually ended up making it into the Naval Academy. I don't know. Says hi, what's up? Mona says I can't even imagine trying to be a teacher now. That's real talk. I wouldn't want to be. I don't want to deal with someone's bastards. I'm sorry, I don't. Kajo saying says, "Oh, Moonlit is Kaja a woman in that avatar? I'm kind of uncomfortable with someone calling me Bay, other than the wifey, and maybe Miss Needle, my favorite snow bunny. I haven't heard from her in a while. She DM'd me like a month ago, but she's been really busy. Hopefully, she's getting her music. When she says she's busy, I hope she's getting her musical career back together. I have no idea what she does. Melissa's W thespians, y'all had good. Let's see. I never. Here's the thing though. I never smashed anyone. Like people were getting it in left and right. I did not get it in high school. I didn't come into my own until college. That's when I started getting it in. But it I was around a lot of cute girls though, yeah, for sure. But I wasn't getting it in high school. I was a nerd who was trying to be cool. So then I started dumbing myself down, unfortunately, and that did make me cooler, but it made my academics suffer. So I wish I didn't do that. I should have nerded out like I was like I started off the ninth grade nerding it out, and then by the by the end of ninth grade, I was trying too hard to fit in. And that probably came as a result of going to three different high schools and living in four different places. So unless it's the trolls being cool, I'm not going to block unless they get good weird. Yeah. Um, I'm thinking that Stalker he's either stopped messing with me or he's being low key or YouTube finally like blocked his account because I haven't had to deal with him in 2 weeks, and that's why I was worried about bringing on because I want to bring on. I told you I want to bring on my Indian friend who's an acid attack survivor, and I did not want her on when I still had that guy stalking my live stream because he would have just dragged down the quality of the stream, and I would have. She already told me she's not sensitive to people making fun of her because she's lived with it through her own life. So she's numb to that. But she said at the same time, she don't want people like, you know, insulting her. But she said, no, she's like, no, I'm a big girl. I can handle it. But she was like, I prefer not to have people like make fun of me. I was like, yeah, of course. So I wasn't going to bring her on as long as I was dealing with that troll. And I don't think he's coming back. He said, bro, he said, mom, you gonna spike it. Yeah, yeah, let me stop. I mean, but me and Miss Nita don't fool around like that. I'm just joking, calling her Snow Bunny, like, cause she is cute. She doesn't think she is, but she's definitely cute. But yeah, I mean, Kaja says I'm from India, Kerala. Yeah, it's not about where you're from; it's whether you're a male or female. I don't want a male call me Bay because that's patently gay. Mona says, "Don't trust. I'll hop on," or Ellie can. I know. All right, yeah. Thanks. He said, "Nah, Needle is sexy as f." Yeah, yeah, she. Telling you. Well, I am gonna meet her like once I go back to Germany. I want her to meet me and the wife, but the problem is, well, my wife didn't tell me to like it's about 3 months that the same just like they had the restrictions coming to the U.S. They got the same restrictions going to Schengen countries. So just like she has to get a tourist visa to come to the U.S. where like unlike us going to the Philippines, they also have to have a visa to go to the Schengen countries like Germany and the rest of them, where U.S. passport is we have unrestricted access through the Schengen country. So I would have to try to sponsor. I don't know how that would work. She was saying I could sponsor her for a visa to 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 Europe. I'm like, how? I'm not a national of the EU, so we'll see. But I still want to go back to Germany. So either way, I know that Miss Needle says she would be willing to be my tour guide. Since the last time I've been out there was with when I was in the military. So I don't know how to, you know, it would be helpful to have someone there. But anyway, I'm about to wrap this up. It's 3:30, fam. Um, it's late as a mug, and I'm losing my voice. He's off topic. Wife swap, Mrs. Moon and Mrs. Contrarian, and it's only one key that goes in that hole. So I'm playing, but maybe not. Nah, no, 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 no. Do you remember that show, Wife Swap? And like, I've never watched the show. I only know about it because of the Chappelle show. So, but I think on the show they don't actually, do things with the other person's partner. Um, but of course, that was the funny, understated part that they made fun of on the Chappelle show. But yeah, I would never swap the wife. That's the reason I got her in the first place. Now, if she want, well, she's strictly males, but I was like, it'd be different if she was like polyamorous or something like that, where she liked other women, like that dude on um uh what do you call it, 90 Day Fiance, when he was dating, it was a black guy, I think his name was Tariq or something, and he started dating his Filipina girlfriend, and then he found out that she was bisexual. So she wanted to engage in a polyamorous relationship where she could also have a girlfriend. And so at first, when they did that, she started dating his ex girlfriend in Thailand. But then she got jealous because, being that that was his ex girlfriend, she was scared that he would like her more than she liked her. So they ended that. But then she ended up finding another. I'm like, this dude is living the fucking life. I did not, my wife made it crystal clear that is never happening. I was like, man, nah. But um and I'm pretty sure and I'm pretty and just like my wife wouldn't want to do that, I'm sure Ellie has no interest in me whatsoever. So I think it's this pretty sure it's the same as well. Pretty sure she has no interest in me whatsoever. She like, honey, no. Oh shit, you said you just got in big trouble. Oh, she must be watching this. Ellie, I said no. But yeah, so yeah, 90 Day Fiance, that was like one of the best seasons when, well, a couple of seasons, because they were on like three different seasons. You know, how 90 Day Fiance, they have like, there's 90 Day Fiance, and then there's like five fucking spin-off shows off of 90 Day Fiance. They got 90 Day Fiance the other way. They have 90 Day, I don't know, it's like, there's like 90 Day Fiance, and then there's like five freaking spin-offs off of it. And the same people will keep coming back because they just make a career out of being on those shows, which I don't blame them. I would That actually reminded me. I was going to ask my wife earlier. I'm gonna ask her when I get off. Would she ever do a reality show with me? And I'm like, look, baby, we could just pretend to be going at each other because we rarely argue. Like, we could pretend to be always arguing about dumb shit just so we can make some money. Yeah, ask her if she would be down for it. So, um, anyway, I'm about to go, fam. Um, but yeah, I knew you were joking, of course. But she probably didn't know, so you might be in trouble. um, but no, yeah, I was like, no, thank you. She is a beautiful woman, but I would never do that. And getting back to the role of morality, again, that's a case where it's not immoral, but it just breaks social norms, right? And so that's why I'm gonna do these little late talk philosophies for the rest of the week. I mean, for the rest of next week too. I'm making to different discussions, but this is why I wanted to make it clear that there's morality bleeds into a bunch of other different categories, which is personal distaste, social norm, and legality. And I think the only way to navigate that is by putting a premium on rationality so that we know, so that we can kind of make optimal decisions even when we have suboptimal information, right? That's pretty much we can all that's pretty much the only thing we can do. We don't always know if something is moral or not. We don't always know if something is legal or not. We don't always know if something is normal or in as far as social convention is concerned. And we don't know if something is personally distasteful to others. What we do know is, hey, is this a rational thing to do in this particular time and place? And if it's not, then that probably covers all four categories. Being rational is a survival is being rational gives you more survival value. It's more longer longer term survival. This is why humans have actually evolved to have to do truth evaluation, unlike unlike the other animals. We have the capacity for logic and empirical investigation. Anyway, being a little bit nerdy, so I'm out, guys. If anyone has any other questions, Critical Rick, you're always invited back, brother. No, I hope there's no hard feelings. Only thing I was trying to implore to Critical Rick was that what he was talking about wasn't morality. He was talking about matters of criminal justice, matters of social convention, and matters of you know, uh, and and doing arm and discuss doing sort of like armchair abnormal psychology. And again, that's I'm a I'm very nerdy about psychology and stuff. So even though that wasn't the subject I was discussing, I'm able to suss out different factoids about those sorts of things. So for people who miss that, people who are mentally ill or under the influence of a strong chemical substance cannot make moral decisions. So that's what I was trying to implore on him. And then when he was talking about what is the morality involved in how society treats those folks, and I'm like, well, obviously, society has a vested interest in protecting innocence from dangerous individuals. So that is one of the primary duties of any government is the protection of its citizens from threats, either from within or without, or from beyond, outside of the society, which is national defense and law enforcement. But other than that, I don't know how we're talking about it as being a matter of morality. So we'll get into some more stuff tomorrow, guys. A little bit earlier though. This is I should actually be getting up in an hour, so way past my bedtime. But I'm out, guys. Take care. Be righteous to one each other, to each other. I'm trying to sound like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and I'm failing. I'm sorry. It's late, and most of you are too young to even know what Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is. But no one's here anyway, so guys, if you want, um, leave me a comment, a question in the comment section. If you want to support me, you can do so through dropping me a super thanks or a cash app, or sign up for membership. If you can't do that, just give me a like and a subscribe and share the video. Appreciate it a lot, guys. Thank you. Take care.